The words hit me like a physical blow across the face, echoing through the upscale Italian restaurant where we'd gathered to celebrate my grandson Tyler's high school graduation. "You are a disgrace to the family." Lauren's voice carried that particular brand of venom she'd perfected over the years, loud enough that nearby tables turned to stare at our family drama unfolding in real time. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly as they gripped the white linen napkin in my lap, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation creep up my neck. At 67 years old, you'd think I'd be immune to my daughter-in-law's attacks by now, but Lauren had a gift for finding new ways to twist the knife. This time, her fury was directed at me because I dared to suggest that Tyler might want to consider community college before diving into an expensive 4-year program, a practical suggestion born from genuine concern about student debt, not an attempt to diminish his achievements. "Margaret always has to rain on everyone's parade," Lauren continued, her perfectly manicured fingers gesturing dramatically as she addressed the table like she was delivering a courtroom closing argument. "She can't stand to see anyone happy. It's like she feeds off negativity." My son David shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting between his wife and me with that familiar look of a man caught between two forces he couldn't control. Tyler, my 18-year-old grandson, who should have been the center of attention tonight, stared down at his untouched plate of pasta, his celebration dinner ruined by another family showdown he'd witnessed too many times before. But here's the thing about being called a disgrace. Sometimes it gives you a clarity you didn't know you needed. As I sat there, watching Lauren's performance, feeling the weight of 15 years of her constant belittlement and manipulation, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way she was using my grandson's special night as a stage for her cruelty, or maybe it was simply that I'd finally had enough. But in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. You see, Lauren had no idea that for the past 6 months, I'd been conducting my own little investigation into her past. It started innocently enough. I'd been working on a family genealogy project, trying to trace our family history for Tyler's senior project about heritage. But when I tried to research Lauren's side of the family, I'd hit nothing but dead ends and inconsistencies. The woman who claimed to be an open book had chapters missing from her story. I'd hired a private investigator named Marcus Chen, a thorough man in his 50s who specialized in background checks and family research. What he'd uncovered over months of careful digging had left me speechless, sitting in my living room with a manila folder full of documents that painted a picture of the woman my son had married. A picture that was nothing like the carefully crafted image she'd presented to our family. "Lauren," I said quietly, my voice cutting through her continued tirade about my supposed character flaw. The entire table fell silent, perhaps sensing something different in my tone. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade as I reached into my purse and withdrew the folder I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Before you continue calling me a disgrace, there's something I think everyone should know." Her eyes immediately locked onto the manila folder in my hands, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not confusion, but recognition, fear. In that split second, I knew that Lauren understood exactly what I was holding, and her perfectly composed mask began to crack. "What is that?" David asked, his voice uncertain as he looked between his wife and mother. "This," I said, opening the folder with deliberate slowness, "is the truth about your wife's past. The truth she's been hiding from this family for 15 years. I pulled out the first photograph, a school picture of a beautiful young girl with Lauren's distinctive green eye and auburn hair. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sophia Martinez. She's 23 years old, lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and works as a nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital." Lauren's face had gone completely white, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly, her knuckles were bone white. "You had no right," she whispered, but her voice had lost all its earlier venom. "This young woman," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "has spent her entire life believing that her mother died in a car accident when she was 5 years old. She was raised by her maternal grandmother, Maria Martinez, who took her in when her mother, then known as Laura Martinez, abandoned her and disappeared without a trace." The silence at our table was deafening. David's mouth had fallen open. Tyler was staring at the photograph with wide eyes, and Lauren looked like she was about to be sick. "But the most interesting part," I said, pulling out a birth certificate, "is that Sophia was born when Lauren, was just 16 years old. The father's name on the certificate is listed as unknown, but according to my investigator's research, Lauren left Phoenix immediately after giving birth, changed her her name, created an entirely new identity, and never looked back. "Stop," Lauren whispered, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Please, just stop." But I wasn't finished. Not after 15 years of her calling me names, undermining my relationship with my son and grandson, and treating me like I was the problem in this family. "So, when you call me a disgrace, Lauren, or should I say Laura, I can't help but wonder what that makes a mother who abandoned her 5-year-old daughter and let her believe she was dead." The aftermath of my revelation was like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse in slow motion. Laura, sat frozen in her chair, tears streaming down her face, as the weight of her exposed secret settled over our table like a suffocating blanket. The bustling restaurant around us seemed to fade into background noise as our family imploded in real time. David was the first to break the stunned silence, his voice hoarse and barely recognizable. "Is this true?" He turned to face his wife, and I could see 15 years of marriage crumbling in his eyes. "Lauren, is any of this true?" She couldn't even look at him. Her perfectly styled blonde hair had fallen forward, creating a curtain that hid her face as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. When she finally spoke, her voice was so small I had to strain to hear it over the restaurant's ambient noise. "I was 16, she whispered. "I was just a kid myself. I didn't know how to be a mother. I couldn't." Her words trailed off into another sob. Tyler, my sweet grandson, who had been the unwitting center of this family storm, pushed his chair back from the table with a scraping sound that made everyone wince. I have a cousin?" His voice cracked with confusion and hurt. "Why didn't you ever tell us? Why didn't you tell me I had family?" The raw pain in his voice cut through me like a knife. This was supposed to be his night, his celebration, and instead he was learning that his entire family history was built on lies. I felt a moment of doubt about my timing, but then I remembered all the times Lauren had humiliated me in front of him, all the times she'd made me feel small and worthless in my own grandson's eyes. "It's complicated, Tyler," Lauren said, finally lifting her head to look at him. Her makeup was ruined, black mascara streaking down her cheeks like dark tears. "I made mistakes when I was young. Terrible mistakes. Abandoning your child isn't a mistake," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's a choice, just like lying to your husband and son for 15 years was a choice." David's face had gone through a spectrum of emotion: shock, confusion, hurt, and now I could see anger beginning to simmer beneath the surface. His hands were clenched into fists on the white tablecloth, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "What else?" he demanded. "What else have you lied about? Our entire relationship, our marriage. What parts of it were real?" Lauren flinched as if he'd slapped her. "Everything about us is real, David. Everything about our family, our love, that's all real. This was my past. This was before you." "Before me?" David's voice rose, causing several nearby tables to openly stare at our family drama. "You told me you were an orphan. You said you had no family. We based our entire relationship on you being this tragic figure who had lost everyone, and I felt like I was rescuing you, giving you the family you'd never had." I pulled out another document from my folder, a marriage certificate from Clark County, Nevada. "She also failed to mention that she was married before," I said, sliding the paper across the table, "to a man named Roberto Martinez in Las Vegas when she was 17. The marriage was annulled 6 months later, but it's another piece of her past she conveniently forgot to share." David stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. "You were married to Sophia's father?" "No," Lauren said quickly, shaking her head. "Roberto wasn't Sophia's father. I met him after I left Phoenix. The marriage was a mistake. I was young and scared and alone, and he seemed like he could take care of me, but it didn't work out." "So who is Sophia's father?" Tyler asked, his voice small and confused. Lauren's silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking glasses, conversations, the soft jazz playing overhead, seemed absurdly normal given the family apocalypse happening at our table. "His name was Carlos," she finally whispered. "We were both in high school. When I told him I was pregnant, he wanted me to get rid of it. When I wouldn't, he said he never wanted to see me again. His family had money, influence. They made it clear that if I caused any trouble for Carlos, they'd make my life hell." I pulled out another photograph, this one of a young woman who looked remarkably like Lauren, standing next to an elderly Hispanic woman with kind eye and a gentle smile. "This is Sophia with her grandmother Maria, taken just last month. Maria is 82 years old now and in failing health. She's been raising your daughter daughter alone all these years, working 2 jobs to put her through nursing school. Why are you doing this? Lauren turned to me with desperation in her eyes. Why now? Why couldn't you just leave the past alone? The question hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I felt the weight of what I'd unleashed. But then I remembered every family gathering where Lauren had made snide comments about my cooking, my clothes, my opinion. Every time she'd rolled her eyes when I'd tried to share a story or offer advice. Every time she'd made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Because, I said, my voice steady and clear, you called me a disgrace. You've spent 15 years treating me like I'm some kind of burden on this family, like I'm the problem. You've made me feel small and worthless and unwanted at every opportunity, and I got tired of being your punching bag. I reached into the folder one more time and pulled out the most devastating piece of evidence I had. A letter handwritten on hospital stationery. This is a letter Sophia wrote to her mother last year when she thought she was dying during a severe bout with COVID. She was alone in the ICU, barely able to breathe, and she wrote this letter to the mother she thought was dead, telling her how much she missed her and wished she could have known her. I began to read aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word. Dear Mom, I know you can't hear me, but I needed to tell you how much I love you. Grandma Maria told me you were beautiful and kind, and that you would have loved me so much if you hadn't died in that accident. I became a nurse because she said you always wanted to help people. I hope I'm making you proud in heaven. The letter shattered something in Lauren. She doubled over in her chair, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Stop, please stop. I can't hear anymore. But I wasn't finished. She signs it. Your daughter who never got to say goodbye, Sophia. This young woman has spent her entire life grieving for a mother who wasn't dead, who was living less than 2 states away, building a new life and pretending she never existed. David pushed back from the table so abruptly, his chair nearly toppled over. I need air, he said, his voice hollow. I need to think. As he walked away, Tyler looked between his sobbing mother and me, his young face a mask of confusion and pain. Grandma, he said quietly, what happens now? 3 weeks after that devastating dinner, I found myself standing in the arrivals terminal at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, holding a sign with my own name on it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one doing the picking up, but I felt more nervous than I had in years. Beside me, Tyler shifted his weight from foot to foot, his eyes scanning every face that emerged from the security checkpoint. The aftermath of my revelation had been swift and brutal. David had moved into a hotel that very night, refusing to even look at Lauren as she pleaded with him through their bedroom door. The sound of her sobbing had carried through the walls of their house for days, but I felt no satisfaction in her pain. What I'd done wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, and truth has a way of cutting everyone, even those who wield it. Tyler had been the one to suggest we reach out to Sophia. She's my cousin, he'd said with the simple logic of 18-year-old idealism. She's family. She deserves to know the truth, and maybe she deserves to decide for herself if she wants to meet her mom. The private investigator, Marcus, had helped us make contact. The conversation with Sophia had been one of the most difficult phone calls of my life. How do you tell someone that their entire life story is a lie? That the mother they'd mourned for 18 years was alive and living under a different name just 400 miles away? Sophia had been quiet for a long time after I'd explained everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. I need to see proof, she'd said. I need to see her face. So here we were, Tyler and I, waiting for a young woman who was about to confront the mother who'd abandoned her. Lauren had begged to come, but Sophia had been firm. She wanted to meet her family first, to understand the people her mother had chosen over her before deciding if she was ready for that confrontation. There, Tyler said suddenly, pointing toward the security exit. That's her, isn't it? I knew it was Sophia before she even fully emerged from the crowd. She had Lauren's distinctive walk, that particular way of holding her shoulders that spoke of quiet strength. But where Lauren's beauty was polished and careful, Sophia's was natural and unguarded. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore scrubs. She'd come straight from a 12-hour shift at the hospital. When our eyes met, the resemblance was so striking it took my breath away. This young woman was what Lauren might have looked like if life hadn't taught her to build walls around herself. Sophia's green eyes held a wariness that broke my heart, but also a curiosity that gave me hope. Mrs. Margaret, she said as she approached, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of her grandmother's influence. Just Margaret, sweetheart, I said, surprised by how emotional I felt seeing her in person. And this is Tyler, your cousin. Tyler, who had been so confident on the phone, suddenly seemed tongue-tied. These These two young people who should have grown up knowing each other stood facing each other like strangers, which I realized with a stab of sadness was exactly what they were. "You look like her," Sophia said to Tyler, and I knew she meant Lauren. "I've been looking at the pictures you sent, trying to understand, trying to figure out how I'm supposed to feel about all this." We drove to a quiet coffee shop near the airport, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the wall. Sophia sat across from us, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and began to tell us about her life, the life Lauren had missed entirely. Grandma Maria never remarried after my grandfather died, Sophia said, her voice soft but clear. She worked at a laundromat during the day and cleaned offices at night to pay for my school clothes and supplies. When I wanted to take dance lessons like the other girls, she took on weekend work at a catering company. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden, but I always knew we were struggling. Tyler listened with wide eyes, and I could see him trying to reconcile this story with the comfortable life he'd always known. "What did she tell you about your mom?" he asked. "That she was beautiful and smart and wanted to be a teacher," Sophia said with a sad smile. "That she died in a car accident when I was 5, but that she loved me more than anything in the world." Grandma had pictures, old school photos, a few snapshots from when I was a baby. She'd tell me stories about how my mom would sing to me and how she'd already started saving money for my college education before she died. The carefully constructed mythology of Lauren's supposed death felt even more cruel, hearing it described by the daughter who'd believed it. "Did you ever question it?" I asked gently. "When I got older, yeah. There were things that didn't add up. No grave to visit, no death certificate when I needed one for college financial aid applications. But Grandma would get so upset whenever I asked too many questions. I thought it was just grief, you know? I thought it was too painful for her to talk about." Sophia pulled out her phone and showed us a picture of an elderly woman with silver hair and tired eyes, but whose smile radiated warmth. "This is Grandma Maria last month. She's got diabetes and heart problems now, and the medical bills are, well, they're a lot. I work extra shifts when I can, but nursing school loans and trying to take care of her." She trailed off, shaking her head. The contrast was stark and painful. While Lauren had been living in David's comfortable suburban home, complaining about trivial inconveniences and treating me like a burden, her daughter had been working herself to exhaustion, trying to care for the woman who'd stepped in to raise her. "I have to ask," Sophia said, looking directly at me with those familiar green eyes. "Why now? Why are you telling me this now, after all these years?" I took a deep breath, knowing that my answer would shape everything that came next. "Because your mother spent 15 years making me feel like I was worthless, like I was a problem that the family had to tolerate. And when she called me a disgrace at Tyler's graduation dinner, something inside me snapped. I'd been researching family history and discovered her lies, and I wanted her to know what it felt like to be exposed and humiliated." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing my honesty. "So this wasn't about me," she said finally. "This was about hurting her." The accusation stung because it was partially true, but not entirely. "It started that way," I admitted. "But the more I learned about you, about the life you'd lived, about the grandmother who sacrificed everything to raise you, it became about more than that. It became about truth and about the fact that you deserved to know that you weren't alone in the world, that you had family who wanted to know you." Tyler reached across the table and touched Sophia's hand. "I know this is all messed up," he said, his voice more mature than I'd ever heard it. "I know my mom, our mom, did something terrible, but I'm glad I know about you now. I'm glad you're here." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I've been alone for so long," she whispered. "Since Grandma got sick, I felt like I was drowning, like I had nobody in the world who would care if something happened to me." "You're not alone anymore," I said, meaning every word. "Whatever happens next, whatever you decide about Lauren, you have us now. You have family." That evening, back at my hotel room, I finally made the phone call I'd been dreading. Lauren answered on the first ring, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Margaret, is she there? Did she come?" "She's here," I said. "And Lauren, she's amazing. She's kind and strong and hardworking, and she's been taking care of your mother, her grandmother, who's been sick with diabetes and heart problems, the woman who raised your daughter alone because you decided to disappear." The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long, I thought she might have hung up. "Does she hate me?" Lauren finally whispered. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but she's willing to see you tomorrow if you want. But Lauren, you need to understand that this isn't about what you want anymore. This is about what Sophia needs. This is about you finally putting your daughter first. The next morning, I stood in the lobby of our hotel, watching as Lauren walked through the entrance. She looked terrible, her hair unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her face bare of the makeup she usually wore like armor. But there was something different about her, too. Something raw and real that I'd never seen before. Sophia was waiting in the hotel restaurant, wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. When she saw Lauren approaching, she stood up slowly, and for a moment, mother and daughter just stared at each other across the space of 18 years and 1,000 unspoken words. "Sophia," Lauren whispered, her voice breaking on the name. "Mom," Sophia replied, and the word hung in the air between them like a bridge that might hold their weight, or might crumble under the strain of everything that had been broken. I watched from across the room as they sat down together, and I realized that despite the pain my revelation had caused, despite the family that had been shattered and the relationships that might never heal, this moment, this reunion between a mother and the daughter she'd abandoned, was worth all of it. Sometimes the truth destroys everything you thought you knew, but sometimes, if you're very lucky, it gives you a chance to build something real from the wreckage of all those beautiful lies. As I left them alone to begin the long, difficult work of finding their way back to each other, I thought about Tyler's graduation dinner and Lauren's cruel words. She'd called me a disgrace to the family, but looking at Sophia, strong, kind, compassionate, despite everything she'd endured, I realized that this young woman was the best part of our family, and we'd almost lost her forever to Lauren's shame and fear. Now, at least, she was home.